Okay, folks, I'm in a bit of a hurry today. I could go teach a class in a bit, but I'll see if I can crank out a wagon video and see how fast I can do this. So this is the wagon I'm gonna make because it's the wagon I had when I was a kid, and that's what I prefer. So I'm just gonna dive right in and start making this sucker. And again, I'll leave this open on my other window so I can keep glancing at it. Always keep your reference available and keep double checking with it. All right, so I'm going to use a cube, squish it down, elongate it, and sort of try to match the overall shape of the wagon bed. I'll start with the wagon bed, and generally I'm just trying to match the overall mass and volume of the wagon bed. And I can always adjust things a little bit later, but trying to get it in the ballpark. Now, to start doing this, I'm gonna go into face mode. I'm gonna grab the top face, and what I'm gonna do is shift right click, extrude face, and then I'm gonna extrude in a bit, and then extrude in a bit, and I actually just switched straight to the scale tool. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't, but basically all I'm doing is pulling in, and I'm eyeballing it to check these thicknesses to sort of make sure that they're sort of equal. And I'm just eyeballing it. There's ways to, if you really wanted to, there's ways to be super precise about that. But I'm not worried about it because you know what? Something I've learned over the years is that eyeballing it sometimes is just fine. You're probably not, no one's probably ever going to notice if it's just a tiny bit off. And in some cases it's better. And also it's good to train your eye to eyeball things. The more you eyeball things, the better your eye gets at perceiving those things. Okay, anyways. So all I did was extrude, and all I did was scale inwards when I extruded. So basically, I didn't pull up or down. I didn't pull it any other direction. All I did was extrude and then pinch inwards to create this sort of lip thickness. But I need to create the wagon bed itself, so I'll go ahead and extrude again. I'll pull down, and now this is when I like to use my my hotkeys that I've created for X-ray mode and wireframe on shaded mode, and the buttons are right here. I'm gonna use hotkeys for these that I've custom created. I may make a specific video about how to do those, but for now, just assume if you see X-ray mode going on and off, I'm using a hotkey, but the button is right here. Also, again, there's wireframe on shaded, which I usually just leave on most of the time, but I do have a hotkey for that as well. Which again, at some point, I'll make a separate video just for that. But for now, yeah, X-ray mode. Now, X-ray mode is useful, especially right now when I'm trying to eyeball. Okay, well, just how deep do I need the bed of this wagon to go? I'll turn on X-ray mode just temporarily, eyeball that, and then turn it back off. Which is why I make a hotkey, because it's just so much faster, because I'm always jumping in and out of X-ray mode when I'm modeling. So, okay. So far so good. It's on track. It's got the basic shape of the wagon bed. But there's a couple things we need. The wagon bed is a little bit more, it has rounded corners, has softer, more rounded corners. It's also got a lip that sort of protrudes. So I'm just going to start doing that. Now, this is when I start to talk about the 1, 2, and 3 keys on the keyboard. 1, 2, 3. 1 is just, this is the actual model. 2 is showing you the smooth mesh preview. That's this part. And then it's also showing you the wireframe cage around it. The 3 key is just showing you the smooth mesh preview and not the wireframe, not the actual model. So this is just, again, smooth mesh preview. It's not actually smoothing it. So, but what I'm going to do now, though, is explain some things. First of all, let me go into object mode, because this is a little easier. So right-click, go to object mode. I'm going to go to my attribute editor, and Ctrl A is how I'm getting to it. But it's, again, usually over here. There's a lot of, side panel stuff over here. So I'm going to the attribute editor, and then here in the smooth mesh, which is right kind of in the middle of all these settings there. Smooth mesh right here, and then where it says display subdivisions, I'm going to turn that on because I like to see the dotted lines. The dotted lines are going to basically explain to me It's Maya showing me what Maya is doing in order to smooth this, because it's not just smoothing out the points, it's creating new edges in order to smooth out the points. And in this case, I also want to turn down, in most cases actually, preview division levels, it's set to 2. That's basically saying it's going to smooth it twice, and we don't want that. We are game artists, so I'm going to change that to 1. And now you notice it's not nearly as smooth. It's still smoothing it, still rounding it out, but not twice. It's not doubling the smooth. So anyway, so I would, every time I use this, every time I use Smooth Mesh Preview, 1, 2, and 3 keys, I'm always going to do this. I'm always going to open it up, you know, in the object mode, open up the attribute editor, and I'm going to change display subdivisions, and I'm going to turn on, change it to 1. So, okay. Again, just flying through it. Feel free to rewind anytime you like, if you forget anything, because I'm going to cram a lot in really fast. So now, something about this Smooth Mesh Preview, some of you may have experimented with it and tried, you know, sort of done some things with it. I'm going to go to the multi-cut tool and start making some cuts while I have this mode on, and watch what happens. So I'm going to, because right now it went from a wagon bed, like a cube kind of wagon bed shape, to just a round, sort of elongated round thing, which is not ideal, right? If I want to get some of those corners back, I'm just going to drop an edge loop down here. And as soon as I drop the edge loop, you see that it sort of creases. It sort of pins that corner. And I want to demonstrate something just to make you understand this better. If again, you double click an edge, it gives you the edge loop, right? So double click an edge, gives you the edge loop. Oops, edge mode. Double click an edge, gives you the edge loop. So again, one thing I like to do is straighten out my edges. Like right now, this edge sort of, it's following the path of these faces, in the sense that it's, if you look at it from these angles, it's not actually straight all the way around. It's bending to match percentages of the faces that it's actually cutting, which is fine. That's what it's meant to do that. That is its, you know, sort of intent. But it's not what I want right now. So what I'm going to do is straighten it out. So I'm going to grab the scale tool with the edge loop selected, and I'm just going to pinch in, and I'm just going to keep grabbing it and moving it until it stops moving. When it stops moving, this is now a perfectly straight line. Cool. And then I'm going to go back to the 2 key again, and I'm going to show you now what this means. Like if I've got this edge loop, if I slide it towards the edge, you know, towards this edge, when these edges come closer together, it's pinning that crease a lot tighter. So it's going to be a much tighter, sharper corner. But if I move it away, you see that it softens, and now it's kind of pushing it towards the other side, and it's creasing that side. But basically, if you're using the smoothing, you know, the smoothing tools, when you get edges next to each other, they hold a crease. They hold a tighter corner. So that's a great way to sort of understand that. Just moving this back and forth should help you to sort of understand what this is doing. So anyways, but I do want to crease it, and I'm going to keep going with this. I'm going to make some more cuts, because what I want is a cut along here. So I need a cut here and a cut this way. I also need another cut here, and I need another cut at this end. And that should do it. That should do it for the cuts. I don't need any more cuts at this moment. Before I get any further in shaping the model, I want to just go ahead and clean up all of these, you know, edge loops. I'm going to go ahead and straighten this one. So again, I'm just double clicking the edge, then straightening it. Double click that edge, straighten it. And I'm just going to go through each one of these that I just made and make sure that they're all nice and clean, nice and straight. It's going to make life a lot easier. It's easier to look at. It's easier to sort of manipulate things when you have this nice and clean in that manner. When the edges sort of squiggle around, it gets harder to kind of perceive it. In fact, let me hit the 1 key. Now you'll notice I will jump in and out of the 1 key, 2 key, 3 key. I'll just jump in and out of those modes because it's easier to sort of look at it. It's easier to look at it when it's in the 1 key mode, but you want to see also what's happening with it. And now what I'm doing is I'm eyeballing these corner squares And ideally what I want is I want these corner squares to be square. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. So just trying to match it. Now again, I'm eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I should also judge, because it could be square, but maybe a really tiny square, or it could be a bigger square. And the difference is how tight are these corners, right? So if I make this if I make this square here, or if I make these squares here, if I make these bigger, it's going to be a softer turn, right? Softer corner. Let's go a little softer with it. Let's just go ahead and push this out a bit more. Now, if I push that out a bit more, I'm also going to want to push this out this way to keep it sort of a corner. You know, I want this to be a perfect square. Now, I don't have to. I don't have to make that a perfect square. But if I don't, then this corner is going to turn kind of, it'll be a different kind of corner, where it would be like kind of flat, 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 and then a sharp turn. You know, like it's only going to soften one side of it. Which again, maybe that's what you want at some point. That's not what I want for this case, because this wagon bed, the corner is, you know, a pretty soft corner all the way through that radius. Okay, so again, now I have to match this side. This side. So let me match this side first. So again, looking at this square, trying to make that square. Now I just have to match this one, and then make sure this these two squares are square. Okay, cool. So good enough. And again, that's sort of just what I did there. Just sort of softened the turn here to match that sort of wagon corner thing. So we're getting a rounded cube, rounded corners. Okay. So far, so good. I'm blasting through this as fast as I can. Next, if you look at the reference, it's got basically a lip that sort of protrudes here. So let's go ahead and make that. Start with that. And what I'm going to do, again, this is one of those scenarios. There's a bunch of ways I could do it. I could take this. Let's just do it. Let's just do it this way. Why not? Let's do it this way. Let's just not sort of dilly-dally. So what I did, okay, grab this face, and I'm in face mode, and I select one face, but then I can Ctrl-Shift, double-click the next face in line, right? So because this face is going this way, I could do it this way too. So if I grab this face and then Ctrl-Shift, double-click this face, it grabs that. That's called a face path selection. But it just speeds up your workflow quite a bit if you can grab a face, Control-Shift, double-click, bam. And oh, by the way, this only works if everything is made out of quads. Get triangles. If you get triangles, if you get n-gons, you get any problems with your geometry, these selection tools don't work. These need quads to function, and they're so useful. This is again one of the reasons that I suggest always keeping everything quads. Try to avoid triangles. I know sometimes you need triangles to optimize things. Like, but if I don't use a triangle here, it's gonna have way more edges. If you're gonna optimize things with triangles, I say wait until the very end. Go back and optimize it by cutting, using triangles and whatever you need to do. Because while you're shaping things, having quads is much easier to use. And again, that's why I'm using the multi-cut tool, and I'm using edge loops. I'm not using the split poly. I'm not using the slice. Just using edge loops so far. Okay, so I've selected that top row of faces. I can extrude out. I'll extrude up this way. And I'm extruding up this way, and I'm kind of just eyeballing it to try to get the thickness of the lip that I want. But that's exactly what I'm extruding for. Is I'm extruding up only to get this lip. And then what I'll do is I'll do this again, where I select this face and then Control-Shift, double-click that face. So now I've selected going around this way, and now I can extrude again and pull out this way. Now you'll notice when I pull out that way, because these faces are all, keep faces together is turned on, it's sort of, it's trying to round out the corner here, which might not be a terrible thing, but in this case, I don't really want that, because it's going to round out the corner anyways using the because the smooth, I'm going to use the smooth later anyway. So I don't really want to round out these corners. And again, I want to show you again just how useful the scale tool can be. So what I'll show you now is I'll go ahead and switch off of the extrude tool, and I will go into, I'll actually use the scale tool, but I'll grab these faces here. I'm in face mode. I'm grabbing these faces, and then I will scale in, just like we did with the edges. So this works on faces as well. So I'll grab those faces and scale in. I can grab these faces and scale in this way. And again, basically just all the way around, I'm cleaning up the curvature that's kind of, that it created from the extrude. Because that was not my intent. I didn't really want, I wanted the extrude, but I didn't want it to sort of bend, like kind of wobbly around. So, but then again, if I check it, again, this is right, but at this point now, I'm sort of checking 1 key, 3 key, 1 key, 3 key. At this point, I might use the 2 key a couple times, but the farther, I find that the farther I get in shaping it, the less I use the 2 key and the more I use the 1 key and 3 keys. I use the 1 key as I'm actually doing the operation, and then I just tap the 3 key to sort of check it, to see, you know, how it's coming along. But I will use the 2 key again right here for a minute, because I've got a nice little lip started here. It's kind of coming along. And let me go ahead and switch off the attribute here to free up some screen space. But now I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit more. I'll go to multi-cut, shift right click, multi-cut, holding the control key again to drop edge loops. And I'll drop an edge loop down here because again, I want to match my reference. The reference has a little bit more of a straight side and then it kind of bends in. But actually, so it's down at the bottom here. It sort of comes down and then bends around like this, right? So it's got a little bit of a lip to it. Not as much of a lip as up here, but more of a kind of a bump. More of a bump than a lip. So I'm going to go ahead and make that. And to do that, basically what I'm going to do is similar to what I made the lip with. Go to the move tool, just for selection purposes, to get off of this multi-cut tool. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab here, Control Shift double click, get that face path selection going, and then I'm going to Shift right click, Extrude Face. And the manipulator showed up over here, so whatever. But check it out. This time I'm going to pull out a bit, but not very much. I'm going to pull out just a bit, just enough to sort of create this little kind of lump here, which is again more true to the reference. Maybe I'll go a little bit farther. But I'm not pulling it so far out. I'm not pulling it so far out that it's going to create this sort of like protrusion, like the top part has. Okay, so now again, I'm going to go back through and clean up after it because these faces were all connected and making right angle turns. That's why I have to clean up after this, where it creates that sort of bend and bendy curvature stuff. Which again, maybe you're okay with that. Maybe it doesn't affect the shape in a negative way. Maybe it doesn't create a problem for you. But I also personally am just a little OCD where I want to clean up after myself and keep the model looking, or keep it nice and clean, where there's nice sort of planar shapes, and then the smooth is what creates the curvature that I need. Okay, so far so good. It's definitely on track to being a decent wagon bed. I do also want to sharpen up this a bit. So down here again, there's nothing really creasing down here in terms of maintaining the curvature there. I'm sorry, not maintaining the curvature. It's a little too curvy in the wagon bed interior. So I want to sort of crease it a little. So what I'm going to do is again multi-cut tool. And then just drop an edge loop somewhere down here, and you see immediately that it's still a little curvy. You still got a little soft corner there, but it creases it a little bit. It's a tighter corner, and it feels a lot better. Again, if you go to the if you look at it with wireframe on shaded, deselected, it's a little easier to see, but this is a much sort of tighter corner. It feels more appropriate to the actual curvature that's in the reference. So let's just call that good. Let's say that's a good wagon bed. However, again, this is what would export. If you hit the 1 key, this is the actual model. This is just a preview. So let's actually smooth it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn off the 3 key, go back to the 1 key, but I'm actually going to do the smooth. So I'm gonna shift right click, smooth. This is now actually smoothed. If I hit the 3 key now, it's going into extra smooth mode. That's going into like crazy smooth mode, which we don't want. Again, we're game artists. We can't get away with that. Speaking of which, this is already too dense. This is too much. We need to clean up after ourselves. The smooth is going to add edges where you need them. It's going to add edges where you need them in order to soften corners. However, it's also going to add edges where you don't need them. Like, for instance, this edge loop right here does not need to exist. It is just taking up poly count for no reason. It's not affecting the silhouette. And I can tell that, by the way, by this. If I just drag this edge back and forth, the shape doesn't change at all. Like, nothing happens. So this edge is useless. It's just adding to the poly count for no reason. So shift right click, delete edge. Or again, this edge loop can go away as well. The other alternative is Control delete, not the delete key. Don't ever hit the delete key. You'd be leaving stray vertices, which a lot of you had problems with. But double click, Control delete, and let me just show you. Okay, look, if I hit the delete key, just the delete key, I left a bunch of stray vertices here, which is a problem. That's not good. It's creating n-gons everywhere. It's really bad, so don't do that. So again, double click, Control delete. Now those vertices are completely gone. The edge and the vertices are gone. Okay. So again, I'm just gonna go through and clean this up really fast. You get the idea now. So Control delete, or again, double click, shift right click, delete edge, which is kind of my habit. That's what I do. This doesn't need to be there. This doesn't need to be there. Now, sometimes along here, I'll go ahead and get rid of this one as well. So which again it's tightening the corner a little bit when I do some of that. Some of these are kind of, you might start to sort of feel like some of these get debatable. Like right here, this edge loop here. It's sort of personally, I think this needs to go away because the wagon bed actually is pretty straight right there. This is creating a little bit of curvature here that I think actually doesn't exist in the reference. So I am going to delete that. But here's the thing: if I delete it, you see how the edge sort of pops out and becomes straighter. So like down here, this is where you start to make decisions. This right here, this edge loop that I just selected going around, it is affecting the shape here. It's creating a little subtle curvature there before it sort of goes this way. Now this is where you sort of have to make an artistic decision. This edge loop does add to the poly count. Every face going along this way, every face going that way, those are all faces that are created by that edge loop that don't need to exist necessarily. But you have to decide, do they need to exist? Is making sure that this has a subtle sort of curvature right here, is that subtle curvature really vital to the shape? Does it really hold that shape and make it feel better artistically? If you really feel like it's necessary, then leave it in. If you're like, well, getting rid of that edge loop, it still reads as a wagon bed. It's still fine. Or maybe you think, oh, maybe it actually looks better. I mean, that's a decision you have to make and sort of analyze. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in. So I think we're pretty good on cleaning now. You'll notice again that the corners need the edges. Those extra edges on the corners are necessary because that's what creates the curve. If there's edges traveling across flat surfaces, that's when you probably need to just get rid of them. Okay, so wagon bed, good to go. Again, I'm gonna hurry up. So let's see what's next. I usually I'll make the wheels next. So let's make wheels. Wheels, again, I almost never use cylinders. I usually create cylinders from cubes in many cases. There are occasions though that I will use cylinders. Wheels are one of them. So I'm gonna go ahead and just rotate this into position, and I'll make sure it's rotated 90 degrees. So I'll type it in. I will hit the W key, move it down, R key, squish it, and basically just match the general size and shape of wagon wheels. Try to line it up roughly where I think it should be as well. Cat from slapping my mouse with her tail. Okay, so now to do something nice with this wheel wise, I'm going to show you what I would encourage you to do, or at least this is an option you could do to make it a nicer wheel. This is a cylinder. Cylinders by themselves, and by the way, just leaving it like this is lazy. Just, oh look, there's a cylinder. Yeah, okay, but do more with it. So what I mean by that is, carve into it a bit, do something to it. But let me show you what I would do. Okay, ready? First of all, actually, one thing about cylinders, if you go into the creation dialog, in the inputs of the channel box, right now, as one of the reasons cylinders suck, let me hit the F key on this, is that there are triangles all the way around like this, and all those triangles, all those edges come down to one single point, which is really a pain to work with. You can make life easier for yourself really quickly by just, as soon as you make a cylinder, go straight here to subdivision caps and just type in 2. Give yourself a subdivision cap to work with, because now, and watch this, let me show you why. If you go to the multi-cut tool and you want to use it properly, use it well, with what I mean by that is using the insert edge loop tool inside of it. Watch this. If I hold the control key down, which is again how to insert edge loops, right? I can insert edge loops all over here right now, but as soon as I get to the triangles, look, nothing. It does not want to do insert edge loops on triangles because they don't work on triangles. So being able to manipulate the shapes here with edge loops is way, way, way easier than if you have triangles everywhere that you can't do. Like you can edit triangles, but you have to manually cut them. You have to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Edge loops get weird. They die. In fact, look at this. If I go this way, you see how the edge loop goes? It goes through the quads. It goes through the quads just fine, and then it dies on the triangle because it doesn't know what to do with it. It's like, oh, wait, there's a triangle here. I don't know what to do. Okay, so cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to eyeball sort of the thickness of the tire and sort of put an edge loop in for that. And I'll do that on both sides. So that's where my tire, the black part of the tire sort of stops. And I just eyeballed it. I'm kind of in a hurry, but okay. Now, if that's where the tire is, I also need some other things. First of all, let's make the tire feel better. So let's, I'm gonna hold Control and Shift, and that's gonna snap. Right now that's got magnets to snap, and I'll try to snap it right to the middle of that. Then I'll do it again, Control Shift, and try to snap to the middle of here, and then the middle of here. That gives me basically perfect, it cut these in half perfectly. You don't have to do that. Again, I could have just eyeballed it. It doesn't really matter. But what I can do now is double click this edge loop, Control Shift, double click this edge loop, Control Shift, double click this edge loop. Now I've got all 3 of those edge loops, and I can just scale outwards. That's going to basically puff out the tire, right? So now the tire has some curvature, and it feels more like a tire instead of a cylinder. And then I could take it a little further. The tires should be sort of flat. Actually, no, I'll leave that alone. I could just get rid of this edge loop now, though. Now that I've used it to sort of bisect the wheel just right, I could just go ahead and delete that edge loop. It doesn't really need to be there because the tire should be it curves on the corners of the tire, but the tire itself should be sort of flat. Generally speaking, not always the case, maybe. Depending on your reference, I guess. But okay, so there we go. We've got that going. Now the wheel well itself. If you really look at the wheel well, it sort of comes in a bit. That's why they call it a wheel well, right? So I've created a thickness of the tire here, but I need to also create sort of a placeholder here. This thickness here is where the white part of the wheel well starts. And then I can do, and now what I'm about to do, there's about a dozen ways you could do it. And sometimes, honestly, I do it differently every time. But I'll just do it this way this time because that's what first popped into my head. So I'm going to select these faces and then hold the Control key down to deselect the back side, because it selected the back faces in this case. But what I'll do is I'll select that inner bit there, and I'll hold the Shift key, and then I'll do the grow selection one, which is basically the greater than symbol, and so that will grow my selection. And what I will do now is actually Shift right click Extrude, and then I'll pull in a bit, and then I'll also hit the W key and then pull in this way. I'll push it in like that. So what that's creating again is the wheel well sort of scenario. In fact, I need to make some adjustments. So I need to sort of pull this out a bit, because it goes kind of in more like this first. Then I need to extrude again. So I'm going to Shift right click Extrude again, and then this time hit the scale tool immediately. And I'm pulling in, I'm literally just scaling inwards to create this thickness here. Because if you really look at the reference, there's a flat spot here. So it goes in, then there's a flat spot, and then there's the dome shape where it comes back out. So now I'm going to create that dome shape that comes back out. And that is going to be easiest to do like this. So now I'll extrude again, pull in, but then also pull out. And then I'm just going to sort of eyeball it, pull in, scale in, pull out, scale in, pull out, and sort of try to match the dome shape. And then, in fact, easiest thing to do now would be this. If I start deselecting the perimeter faces here, holding the Control key, I can then pull this out a bit. And in fact, now, because what I needed basically was this edge loop here is what's creating a domey shape. Is because it's sort of coming in and then curving, coming in, curving. So that's how I get that dome shape. But I do need something else from this. I need to also pinch this in a lot, and then sort of adjust the domey shape there. But what I need now from here is the red cap, right? That red cap there. So that's why I scaled this down to whatever I anticipate the red cap size being. And then I'll extrude again from here. And then that cap again sort of tapers a little. Not much, but just a little bit. So I'll hit the scale tool and just taper it in a little bit. Sort of adjust this. And then it also has a bit of a rounded corner. Now the rounded corner on this, maybe it's overkill, but let's just have some fun. Extrude one more time, pull it out a bit, scale tool, pinch it in a bit. And there we go. We've got that nice, like, sort of rounded red cap thing. Of course, not red at the moment, but that's okay. That is a pretty decent wheel. There is actually some, on the inside of the wheel, there's a bit of detail as well. And you could argue that, well, the inside of the wheel, you probably won't see it very well or very much. But it's nice to have a little bit of attention to detail. So maybe you don't need as much detail in it. You should probably have some. So again, I'll just do this again. I'll just select all that and then deselect the back faces that accidentally got selected. Always double check your selections. One of the biggest problems for beginners is they don't double check their selections. And they do an extrude and they don't realize that they extruded something over there too. That's one of the #1 most common mistakes for beginners. Always, like, X-ray mode is great for double checking your selections. Just rotate the camera, check it, make sure that exactly what you needed to select is what you selected. Okay, so again, let's do, actually, yeah, let's grow selection one more time. Okay, so now again, that way I've got the tire thickness here. I'll extrude in, give myself that. In fact, I'll extrude in and then do this. I'll pull in right now. Double check with X-ray mode that I'm not sort of overlapping this sort of extrusion over here and this extrusion. I don't want these to sort of overlap and create problems. But, you know, it looks like I've got a nice gap between them, so I'm good. So I'll extrude in a bit like that, and then I will, again, shift right click extrude. Hit the scale tool, pull it in a bit, create that sort of flat panel part again. And then again, double, in fact, no, okay, what I'll do is this. I'll actually shrink my selection. So shift and then the greater than, less than, so this is I always forget. Greater than, less than, it's okay. So grow selection and shrink selection. I can pull my keyboard up high enough for you to see. It's right here. These right here, it's the, you know, grow and shrink. So one is, you know, one and the other. All right, so grow and shrink selection. Holding the shift key while you tap those. So I'm just going to shrink my selection. And then I'll just pull out this way. So I create a bit of a dome shape on this side as well. And again, there's going to be an axle right here. So I don't really need to get too detailed on the inner side. Just enough to sort of, from a distance, you see that there's some curvature there and it's not just flat and like you didn't do anything. Okay, so there we go. We got a wheel. Obviously, we need more than one wheel, so Ctrl D, scoot it over. And again, I'm just being careful to only grab it on the Z axis in that case. Pull it back this way. And then I can make the other set of wheels. Now, I could instance these. If I wanted to instance these, then anything, if I wanted to continue editing these, I could instance them. That way, anything that I do to the wheel, to this wheel, happens to all four wheels. I could instance them. I usually don't bother because it's not that hard. If I really wanted to, I could just delete one of them. I could just delete one of them and remake the others. You know, just reduplicate them. It's not that big of a deal. Sometimes I might instance them, sometimes not. Okay, so got these two wheels. Now I'll grab both of the wheels, Control D, and then scoot them over to the opposite side. And by the way, I'm working on the grid. You'll notice that the grid, this wagon bed is exactly in the center of the grid. If you look at the it's literally only translate Y. There's only a little bit of value in translate Y, but translate X and Z are zeroed, which means that this is on the grid, which makes life easier if I want to do something like, if I take the X position here, which is right here, translate X is negative 2.9424, right? So I can Control C, copy that value, and I can paste it here on both of these. I'll hold the shift key and grab both of those. I can paste that value, and then I can just delete the negative. Because if I delete the negative, now this is exactly on the opposite side of the grid from this one, because this one's the negative side of the grid. This is the positive side of the grid. And so basically pasting that value means this is exactly on the opposite side now. The only thing I have to do now is just rotate it, just invert it, right? And because it's a wheel, I can do that. I don't have to actually scale negative. Like sometimes you have to scale -1. I don't even have to do that. Like literally the easiest solution is just to rotate. In fact, let's see which way. Yeah, so it's rotate. So rotate Z is 90 right now. And if I just do -90, if I just, again, swap it out, put a negative there instead of a positive, now I have wheels that are exactly where they're supposed to be and inverted. So these wheels are now good to go, and I just need to create the rest of the wagon. So again, if I want to create an axle, let's create the rear axle. Again, this is a rare opportunity where a cylinder is just a quick and dirty, easy way to do this. I don't need to start with a cube because I don't need to do a lot of editing. It's going to stay cylindrical. But I will edit it a bit. First of all, I will go ahead and go in here, and the subdivision axes, I'm just going to go down to like 12. Because once I scale this down, like I need to, so let me go and do that. Once I scale this down to make it nice and thin, like an axle should be, once I scale this down, it doesn't need as many subdivisions to feel round. You really don't. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it though. Is going to be like 90. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, get it so that it's lined up where it should be. Now again, the easiest thing to do, the axle needs to be lined up with the exact center of the wheel, right? So what can I do? Easiest thing to do, hold the V key down and just drag and snap it. So holding the V key, I grab the middle of the manipulator and then snap it to that middle point of the wheel. Then all I have to do is go back here to the translate. It's going to be translate. Which one is it? Yeah, okay. Oh, I know why it's all weird. Haha. Okay, so let's find out. Let's just find it because it's rotated funny. That's why. So translate X was what I thought it would be. Yeah, so if I zero out the translate X, it's now exactly back in the middle of the of this grid right now, right? Of the world. So now I can just, all I got to do now is scale it out until it hits the inside of the wheels. Bam, that's good to go. However, again, I gave some of you a hard time about this. If I go to face mode, these faces right here, they're inside the wheel. Those faces don't need to exist. So I'm just going to hit the delete key. Select those faces, hit delete key. And again, easiest way to select them is select like this across all of these. Hold the control key to deselect those. And there you go. Delete. Now you've got a much lower poly count, much nicer axle, which again, this is what I'm talking about. If you just put a cylinder in here, you just take a cylinder, squash it, throw it in there. That's what I like to call a lazy cylinder. You didn't do anything to it. If you at least pull the subdivision count down to where it's not like a 20 and it's not like way more than you need. If you at least do that, I know you're at least thinking about it and you're not being lazy. You're just, yeah, sometimes you just need a cylinder shape. Like in this case, you just need a cylinder shape. At least play with the subdivision count. And if you can, delete the interior faces that are embedded inside the other model. Because that's what you should do. That will, if I look at a cylinder like this, I'll be like, okay, that's cool. So you needed a cylinder and you did something with it instead of just throwing a cylinder in there. Okay. Same thing with like things like this. If there's a cylinder shape, but you put at least a little bevel to it, like something like this. Again, at least you did something with it, and it's not just a boring cylinder that hasn't been edited at all. Okay. So we got that axle. We need another axle. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. Control D, scoot it forward. And once again, I can use my trick of holding the V key down and snapping it to there, and then just zeroing out the translate X. And there it is. It's exactly where it needs to be. Got axles for both of our wheels, and so forth. So, and now since I'm looking underneath quite a bit right now, now, you know what? Let's do it like people are asking you to do it. Let's just pull everything up above the grid. So I was just gonna hide the grid because I don't, sometimes it gets in my way. But yeah, sure. So let's set the wheels onto the grid. So now the wheels are resting on the grid as if the grid was the floor, which is fine. And that might keep it out of my way a bit, unless sometimes not if I'm looking from down here. But what's left? Okay, we need the rear axle sort of mounting thing. I'm gonna make it super quick and dirty and simple. Again, I'm starting with a cube this time. I like 90% of what I make is gonna start as a cube. That's called box modeling. Sometimes it's a cylinder, but pretty much never anything else. Like all those wacky, crazy primitives up here you can play with. Don't bother, because there's I guess you could try if you want, but all I'm getting at is that it's probably going to be easiest to start with a cube for almost everything. Okay, cubes are much easier to work with. So I'll just go ahead and extend this out. I'll shrink it down. Shrink it down. Oops. Shrink it down this way. Shrink it this way. And I'm not worried too much about lining it up exactly yet. I'm just trying to rough this in. And again, I'm just looking at the reference. I have different references, and I've done this a few times. I've demoed this a few times. But this is where I would probably do something like this. And again, there's always a bunch of ways you could do it, but let's just make it super fast. So let's just hold the control key down, and you know what? I'll hold. I'll just eyeball it. Screw it. Let's be in a hurry. So Control click, grab this face, extrude down, bam. And then all I got to do now is basically line it up. And if you really wanted to get detailed with it, some of you did, which is good. You know, you put some effort in. You could try to smooth this out, kind of, you know, round it out a bit, because this is a 90-degree turn. You could go back in and sort of create a couple of divisions here and sort of bend it more gently. You could do it a few different ways. I'm not going to worry about this right now. I just don't have time. And you could also create this situation here where you have, you could extrude in this way. Oops. Because in reality, there is a bit of a scenario here where this it sort of has like a lip to it, right? And let's just do. So, oops, that's too far. Okay, but you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a bit of a lip there, and I'm just literally blasting this out really fast. This is not good. But what I'm saying is you could put a little effort in to try to match the reference better. But again, I'm not going to worry too much about it because it's underneath. It's on the bottom side of the wagon. Not super visible. Oh, and then there's also this other piece here, which goes like this. So again, I'll hold the V key to snap it into place down here, just to sort of get it where it needs to be roughly. And then I'll scoot it over. And then I'll do this. I'll rotate it and extend it. Match the rotation better. And sort of just get that roughly where it's supposed to be. And now again, to sort of do this better, it would be good to sort of match the reference better in the sense that there's like this part up here tapers, this part down here sort of tapers in a different way. So yes, matching it would be better, but sort of, again, time crunch, because I have to go really soon. Anyways, but what I will do though, at least, is take this edge in edge mode and sort of pull it up like this, because I don't want that really awkward sort of shape there. And I also don't want it to embed too far. Like, I also don't want this to sort of protrude. I don't want that to sort of protrude into the wagon bed. So I need to be careful with that. But then let's just call that good enough. And then I will just duplicate it. Control D, scoot it over, eyeball it, make sure it's roughly where it needs to be. Good enough. Okay, so far so good. I think what I'll have to do is I'll finish modeling this and then I'll do a separate rigging and combining video. Okay, so cool. Now the next piece is one of the trickier pieces. And it took a little creative thinking. I actually did it differently a few different times. Because I did it once and then I was like, huh, you know, I think I have a better way to do it. So there's always going to be different ways to do things, smarter ways, more efficient ways, cleaner ways. So there's not right answers necessarily, but there are plenty of wrong answers. Okay, so, all right, real quick. Cylinder. And again, it's rare that I start with a cylinder, but I can do things with this cylinder to make my life a little easier. And I don't just start with the base cylinder. I do stuff to it. So I'm just kind of placing it roughly where it needs to go. And again, this is where I really looked into sort of the wagon parts. And that's what my Google search term was wagon parts. And I'm trying to find this one exact image real quick. Oh, here. This is basically it. So this is basically what my search terms are, and what I've got. Oh, this one doesn't have it. Okay, hold on. This would kind of work. Obviously, this is a wagon that works, but there's a much better. Hold on. With that one exact wagon part that I need. Oh, this is it. Okay, I found it. Here we go. Right here. So it's this little wagon part right here. This is what actually mounts to the wagon bed, and then the steering column mounts to that. So these are great, by the way. I highly recommend if you're doing searches, you're like, oh, I'm trying to model this or that. Search for the search term and then parts, or maybe search for phone real quick. Search for the search term and then parts, or something else that you might want to consider is search for the search term and then like instruction manual, because a lot of instruction manuals show diagrams of the parts of that thing, right? So that's a great way to sort of research something that you're trying to make. Okay, anyways, so here's what I'm gonna do. In the polycylinder, first of all, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna type in subdivision axes 8, specifically 8. And I'll show you how I came to that conclusion in a second. I also want to give myself a subdivision cap. Like I said, that always makes life easier when you use those. And then the rest of it should be fine. I just sort of want to squish it down a bit. To sort of start with like a kind of a disc almost. Because again, I'm making, if I can, yeah, cool. I'm making this, right? This right here. So it's got a disc shape, and then it has 4 prongs sort of shooting off of it. So that's exactly why I chose a subdivision axes of 8, by the way, because I have 4 prongs that I need, but I also want enough subdivisions to sort of give me the disc shape as well. So I needed a multiple of 4, and I needed a multiple of 4 that I could that was at least dense enough to not look too blocky, so it would feel like a round disc shape. Okay, so again, just it's basically creative thinking. You're basically sort of engineering this, or reverse engineering it, basically. Okay, so now what did I do from here is I oh, and the part that mounts, by the way, is like this, right? So so the disc shape, looking at this image, the disc shape is actually connected to the steering column. This whole thing's upside down, basically. So sometimes I have to remind myself this is upside down. So the disc shape needs to be on this end. The prongs, so the mounting parts sort of extend out towards the wagon bed. Okay, but to do that, easiest thing to do, and now I think I will hide the grid. So just get that out of my way, since I'm literally looking at my model upside down for quite a bit right now. Anyway, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go into face mode. I'm gonna grab these 2 faces and the opposite 2 faces on the other side. And again, double check that, oops, yeah, see, I accidentally had that selected. So I wanna be careful with that, so deselect that. But yeah, I wanna do the opposite sides, because if I go all the way around with it, if I extrude it out right now, I have these 2 options. That doesn't help me, because it's, it's all connected still. This also doesn't help me, because I still have, now I could do it this way and then merge these, but it's just a little bit easier to do it the other way. So anyways, so I don't want to do that. So what I do want to do in this case is what I was saying earlier, grab these 2, and then the 2 on the opposite side, double check my selection, and then extrude. And now I want to pull out, and I'm looking, as I extrude out, I'm looking at this and trying to imagine how far these prongs need to sort of shoot out, the length of the prongs. That's what I'm sort of eyeballing right now. But then I also want to do this, is grab this scale tool of the extrude and pinch in, because again, these prongs, they shoot out, but they also basically sort of taper down. So I'm extruding out, then tapering in. But you'll notice it gives a weird result here. That's not really ideal either. But I can fix that pretty easily by doing this. Go to edge mode, grab this edge, and then again, scale tool. And with the scale tool, this time, if I just go out with the main scale, right, the middle one, it's gonna flare out in a way that I don't want. But the beauty of it is I do have this option, which I can sort of push out, which won't affect the height in this axis, the y-axis, which is fantastic. So now I've basically got 2 of the prongs, And I just have to repeat the process on this on the opposite sides here. And again, it's keeping this together, but it's creating a separation here where I need it. So that's why I'm doing it that way. So extrude again, and then I can pull out, and then I can grab the this scale again on the taper, but I need to go farther. I need to go, oops, I need to go farther with it. So I'm trying to eyeball it. And this is a good idea now to, too late now. All right, so anyways, I'll pull in a bit, and I'll try to eyeball this. I could turn on X-ray mode. That might help a bit for visibility purposes. Okay, so again, I'm sort of eyeballing it. I think I went too far because I'm trying to look at the negative space like here, try to match, sort of match this. Now again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and there's always ways to clean up and adjust it. But let me go ahead and get the edge part fixed now. Go ahead and grab this edge, then scale tool, and sort of puff it out, sort of get it kind of rounded. Okay, that's actually not too bad. I think I'll take it. Again, I could always try to nudge the points. If you don't get it exactly right, you can sort of go back in and sort of nudge the points and try to make sure it's evenly spaced and everything sort of works. But I think I got it in the ballpark pretty well, so I'm just going to go ahead and run with it. But again, this the part where there's the curvature is up here, right? It's on this end. So what I'll do now is just go ahead and actually I'll do this. I'll grab all these, double check my selection, and then grow selection once, extrude, and that gives me that the disc up here, right? That's the rounded part up at the top there. But to get the prongs to really kind of be the shape they need to be, I can do this. I can go into multi-cut tool and just hold the control key down. And this time I will be precise. I'll hold the control key down, and I'll hold control and shift and get one like kind of edge loop, like one thickness, like where one snapping point thickness, and then just go all the way around and do that. And then what I will do is do it again, but on this end, and I'll actually go to. No, I think I'm good. Let's just do this. I probably should have gone 2. But that's okay. Let's just run with it. I don't have time. Okay, so I'll grab. Now I'm going to go to vertex mode and just grab all of these points around. And then check this out. Really fun. Ready? Bam! And I can actually scale this down a bit because it's not quite so thick at that end. So I'll scale these down to give it more of a sort of that thickness at that end of it. But that's, basically what you do. And then now you've got a situation where you've created this shape that you need pretty well. And I could probably bend it a little bit more too, because it does sort of kind of curve a bit more. So to do that, I'm just going to go back to the multi-cut and Control Shift, maybe click here, and then try to match it all the way around. You know what? Here, let me do this. This is what I was going to do earlier. Go into object mode, hit Control 1 to isolate this. So I can kind of look at it without the tires getting them. Again, Control Shift, try to match that. Shift. Right. Shift, bam. Okay, cool. Now what I can do is double click, grab the edge loop. Double click, grab the edge loop. Double click, grab the edge loop. And get and I'm Control Shift double clicking to make sure I have all of those edge loops. And then I can just sort of pull down a bit, and it bends that a bit to where now it sort of slopes and curves a bit more interestingly. And I'll even use the scale tool a bit to sort of have it taper sooner. And there we go. That's that shape basically. So cool. Control 1 again to undo the isolate select. I think the entire thing though is maybe a little too. So let's pull it in. Scale the whole thing down a bit. Always zoom out a bit and check your proportions. Yeah, that's much better. Always zoom out, check your proportions, then zoom back in and start working. I think it's also a little bit too big in this direction, so I'll sort of scale down this way. Again, that feels much better. It's always easier to check proportions if you zoom out. Okay. I am definitely running out of time, but I will hurry this through. We're getting pretty close though. Getting pretty close. So let's make that up. The next part. This is one of the most sort of tricky. This part was pretty tricky, but I just gave you a pretty easy solution if you just follow directions, and then try to eyeball it as best you can. The next part is also another kind of funky one where you're like, well, I don't know, how should I make that shape? It's not obviously a cube. It's not obviously a cylinder. It's kind of. And I've seen different people try to make it in different ways. But let's show you what I would do. So again, cube, right? Almost everything starts with a cube in box modeling. Let's just first of all, let's snap it. Hit the F key, and then let's hold the V key down. Let's just snap it right to the center of this, right? If we're gonna make a steering column, then and this is where the steering column mounts and pivots from, right? This is where the steering column pivots, which is very important to understand because screens around real quick. This is very important because the pivot point needs to rotate from here. This is where the steering column should rotate from. So might as well just get it in position right away to be where it needs to be. I'll go ahead and scale this down a bit, pull it down a little, because this is sort of where we're coming from, right? To make this shape. Now here's the tricky part. Here's where it gets interesting is I basically need, I need this shape right here, and it's basically like a 3-pronged shape. Okay, so let's if we start with a cube, what do I need? I need 3 prongs coming off of it. So the easiest way to do that, this thing is go into face mode, grab this face, and this face. Shift right click, extrude, and if I pull outwards again, so it's keeping all of these connected because that's the default setting, which is fine. But easily enough, this little like widget that pops up every time you extrude, I can just click on keep faces together, turn it off. There we go. I've basically now got three prongs. I've got 3 sort of pieces there to play with, which is a huge head start towards getting the shape I need. Now I just have to sort of refine it and play around with it and sort of get it going. So first of all, let's pull it out farther because it does need to sort of, it almost looks like a Klingon bird of prey. But basically, yeah, this is going to sort of arch a bit and kind of connect, but it needs to connect. This is what holds the axle, right? This is what holds the axle, so it needs to bend to connect down to the axle. But we're not ready for that yet. Okay, W key, let's try it. Let's see. W key, and let's we can start sort of starting to go there. And this could be another chance that we could use the 1, 2, and 3 keys, right? So 1, 2, and 3. But again, if I use these 1, 2, and 3 keys, I'm always going to hit Ctrl A, go to the attribute editor. I'm going to turn on display subdivisions and change it to 1. Now this looks a little bit more appropriate to a game model and what we'd actually sort of see and use. Okay, and again, it's going to start to get where it needs to be, and I could take it a little further because this these 2 pieces in particular really need to come. They have to come all the way down here because that's where the axle connects, right? So we have to match it, axle. And maybe we also want to push them away from each other farther because the axle does kind of come pretty close. I'm sorry, the steering column it connects to the axle pretty close to the wheels. There's not a huge gap. Again, you're looking for negative spaces to help sort of steer you towards getting your proportions right. And so there we go. That's a little bit better. This one just needs to protrude. It kind of does come down a bit, but it also needs to protrude just enough to give you a spot to put the handle, and so that the handle doesn't the handle's not too close to the bed, because otherwise the handle wouldn't kind of work right. Wouldn't be able to steer very well. Okay, so now what could we do from here? One thing we could do is we could sort of play with this a bit. In fact, let me let's do this. Let me grab all of my verts right here. Pull this down a little, just to give a little bit of a space there, because something that occurs to me is that this might be nice to shift right click, extrude. Because by the way, if I do an extrude right here and I pull it in a little, look what happens in the middle of it. Let me isolate this. What happens in the middle of it is I get basically a matching set of edges going around that actually matches this, right? So in fact, if I select both of these, Control 1, you see what I'm saying? Like, this face and that face were sort of lined up, and they were roughly roughly pretty similar. So I'm basically getting almost a matching thing here. And in fact, if I wanted to, I could do this. I could take this again and extrude up. And I'm starting to create a place for these to connect, right? And if I extrude up one more time and just go up a little bit, this now sort of connects with that visually. If I hit the 3 key to really, 3 key, you see how that sort of lines up nicely and matches the number of divisions going around. That's just kind of a nice way to sort of make that feel like it's really connected there. Like this is a connected piece to that, and that maybe one of them embeds inside the other, so to get the rotation. Okay, so far so good. But let's go back to maybe the 1 key and let's just pull this down a bit. I feel like we need a little bit more thickness here, and then it tapers there. So let's just kind of try to get that feeling a little better. Also, you'll notice that here it's a pretty sharp corner. We probably do want a little bit more curvature there, and less extreme circumstances there. But there's other things that are a little bit more important, and we're in a hurry. So let's just keep going. Okay, so multi-cut tool. I can hold the Control key, maybe the Control key and the Shift key. Bam. Again, Control and Shift. Bam. What's that? And then I probably also want to take this and sort of grab these scale tool, pinch it down a bit more, maybe pull it back a little, because it was flaring out a little too much. But and I haven't created the embed there. I a lot of times I don't because I don't have time. But let me show you a fun trick though. Here's another fun trick we can do right here. What to do here? First of all, let me taper this more. It needs to taper more. And then let's do this. This is where it gets kind of tricky. I did something very tricky to give myself an option. What I do here is I extrude, but then I just pull in a little bit right here, and I'll also pull in just a tiny bit this way, just to make sure, just to remind myself that there's like a couple faces there. But mostly I'm pulling in this way, and I'll show you why. I'm doing that entirely to give myself this face and this face, because now all I got to do is extrude out this way, and bam! Now I've created that gap where I've created this gap right here where this curving thing needs to be, where the pivot for the handle needs to be. That's a great solution there, because it's pretty clean. It's like it doesn't add a shit ton of edges. And I'll go ahead and just scale these, make sure that they're nice and flat. I could even pull them in a bit to sort of add to some thickness here. I grab this one and scale towards itself, just to kind of thicken those up a bit. I could pinch the whole thing down a little bit tighter if I want, and just make adjustments like so. Cool, that's a great way to sort of get that handled. Now again, Control 1, bring everything back. If I'm gonna use the smooth mesh tool, smooth mesh preview, oh, these got sort of shifted a little. So these, I guess I do need to pull forward a bit more. Or I could pull the wheels back, to match that. But so okay, so these I'll pull these forward because I want these to basically line up with the axle. That's too much. Let's just do the opposite. Let's grab the wheels and the axle and pull those back to sort of line up better. with the middle of the steering column. Okay, so that feels better. And again, this really should have like curvature there, or a gap there for where the axle actually goes through it, right? But again, I'm just kind of blasting through this. How about this? So again, 1, 2, and 3 keys, right? This is actually what the model looks like right now. This is the smooth preview, but let's actually do the smooth. So if I shift right click and I go to smooth, there it is, smooth, I can go back to the 1 key because now this is the actual model now. And I'm just gonna leave that as it is. That feels pretty good. Not perfect. I would definitely like to do more with it, refine it a bit, but I don't have time. So what can I do now? How about let's do this. Let's just start by creating a cube. Let's just do the handle for now. I'm not going to worry about the bottom part of the handle, the sort of round pivoty point, because I don't have time. But let's just do the handle. I know I've already done this once, but I'm going to go through it again really quickly, because this is going to a more thorough video. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of line that up as if that was you know, where the handle's going to go. I could even hit the 2 key now to start looking at that. I'm going to do that anyway, so I'll get it ready. So display subdivisions, division levels 1. That's kind of already where it needs to be in terms of settings. Okay, but here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab this face. I'm just going to zoom out and sort of shoot this up, because what I really need here is I need a really long handle, right? Because looking at references, these are pretty long handles. And again, there is a bend in the handle, but I'm not gonna do that. At least not yet. I mean, because if you bend things at weird, funny angles where it's not aligned to the axes, it makes modeling more annoying. It's not impossible, it's just annoying. So keeping things lined up on the axes for as long as possible makes modeling easy, because you don't deal with funky, kind of odd twists and angles that are hard to work with. Okay, so now again down here, I could just make this look nicer if I just drop an edge loop down here, just to get that sort of looking nicer as we work. Up here though, I'm gonna go ahead and start blasting out the handle shape. This a little higher. Now in this case, shift right click, extrude. I'm gonna pull it up a bit. Then I'm gonna grab this one, the F key, zoom in a bit. Grab this one and this one, shift right click, face out, and I'll just go out a bit and then extrude again, pull out a bit more, grab this face and this face, shift click, extrude up, click, extrude again, this face, and this face, extrude towards each other. And again, this is where things get a little funky, because I need to basically line these up just right. And sometimes you can use the V key to snap them, but it doesn't always seem to work quite right. When you're extruding 2 faces that are part of the same object, they're both selected, it gets a little funky. So again, I could just switch to the move tool and grab one of the faces and hold the V key, and then it'll snap just fine. And then, of course, I want to delete that face because it's an interior face. But there's still the other face I need to delete. So I'm just going to select them, then hold the Control key to deselect these. And there it is. There's that interior face. Delete it. So now both of the interior faces are gone. And if I wanted to check that, I can easily just, you know, I can easily just grab the face and sort of shift it. Sure enough, look, there's a hole on this side and a hole on that side. That's what I need. I need both of those to have holes, because then I can go to edge mode, grab these edges, shift right click, merge collapse edges, merge border edges, bam. And I didn't even have to adjust the tolerance in that because they were exactly on top of each other. Okay, and then of course the 2 key shows me basically kind of what it's starting to look like, but I can also multi-cut, crease that a bit so that that doesn't get so funky. And if I want, you know, it's nice to crease down here a little, maybe crease down here a little, keep this nice and, you know, sort of tight cornered, like a pipe shape. Then up here again, I can sort of like line this up into the middle more. And then I can pull this up a bit if I want, and sort of get that sort of nice handle. So I can also kind of tweak some values here where I can sort of take these corner verts and pull them in a little, and then scale tool to pinch them in a little this way. And I can sort of round out those corners if I want. All kinds of stuff you could do, shaping this handle. It depends on exactly how much shape you want to it, what kind of shape. But again, it's pretty cool. Also, I need to bend it, right? So, you know what? I'll go ahead and wait. I'll go ahead and smooth it first, and then I'll bend it. That's fine. So I'll go ahead and shift right click, smooth. It's actually smooth now. Now I can go back in and clean up after myself. Go to edge mode. So let's get rid of this edge loop. It doesn't need to exist. Let's take this edge loop and sort of scoot it down a little to where I think the bend needs to happen. Go ahead and delete this edge loop, this edge loop, this edge loop, this one, and just, I'm just cleaning up after myself, right? Which is important. It's important to keep these things nice and clean. The rest of these edge loops probably need to actually be there. This is a little bit wonky. I would have been nice to, if I had cut a few more creases in there, it could have helped to turn that corner better. It looks a little funky, but whatever. So could I get rid of some more edge loops? I could optimize a little bit if I really wanted to, but I'm not going to worry about it because again, at least everything is quads. It's all nice, easy to work with. Okay, cool. So again, bending it. Easiest thing to do: go to vertice mode, grab all of these vertices, and then just rotate a bit to create that bend, and maybe sort of reposition a bit. Position. Sort of try to match that bend, and that's probably the easiest solution right there. Just there you go. You got the bend in the handle, and you've got a nicely made handle. Okay, that's basically it. We've got a wagon. Again, there's a few things I would like to clean up and do better and make nicer, but it works. This is basically the wagon, and the scale of the handles are giant. It's a pretty gigantic handle. I could actually just scale the whole thing. Mostly it's up here. But if I scale up here, it's going to taper and kind of be funny. So whatever. It would take a little bit of work to fit. Okay, so that's it. There's a wagon. It's made pretty cleanly, pretty low poly. There's, again, a few more cuts and tweaks, and like I could refine some of the pieces. But it's put together. It looks like a wagon. It could work. I could rig this and animate it, which I will again show you in the next video. Okay, cool. Good luck, everyone. And hopefully this helps. Again, pause, rewind until you have nightmares in my voice. If you really want to, if I went too fast, which I know I did, but that's fine. That's why pausing and rewinding exists. Okay. Good luck, everyone.